In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is another very important episode concerning Lord Shiva. You all know that Lord Shiva's wife was Sati and her father was Daksha. And you know that Daksha is the Prajapati. In other words, he's entrusted with the affairs of creation. He's a progenitor, which means he gave birth to many, many, many entities who then gave birth to many, many more. And one of his exalted daughters is Sati. It was Brahma who convinced Daksha to give Sati to Shiva in marriage. Even though Shiva and Sati had previously been also together as Shiva and Parvati, in this time, Daksha, by nature, even though he was a Prajapati, Bhagavatam tells us that he was very envious of Lord Shiva. He felt that Lord Shiva's position in this entire universe was actually greater than him. And generally speaking, if you are the father-in-law and your son-in-law is more famous than you, you tend to have a problem, isn't it? I think it's quite natural in the material world. You want to understand that, you have that respect. So, because Brahma was his father, he reluctantly gave Sati to Lord Shiva. And so one day Daksha, he arranged a great sacrifice. And in that sacrifice, he invited everyone over. All the VIPs came. He invited, of course, his son-in-law, Lord Shiva. Now, Lord Shiva doesn't stay in opulence. You all know that Lord Shiva stays in the simplest of places. And he stays in places where most normal living entities would not want to stay because he's very renounced. So Daksha was already upset with Lord Shiva because when he gave his daughter in hand to Lord Shiva, he was thinking what a downgrade it is. Instead of my daughter Sati being married to a man as opulent as I am, she's now living very simply. She's living with him in great austerity, nothing. In fact, Bhagavatam says that when Sati became consort, when she got married to Lord Shiva, he could not even afford to give her any gold because he had no gold. It was Daksha who had to give all the gold. So all this was in his mind and he was envious of Lord Shiva. Yet he was thinking in the material universe, Lord Shiva is extolled almost as high, right, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's known as Bhagavan. So how is it that, he can be so great? So during the assembly, everybody came and they all sat. And then at the very end, Lord Shiva also came and he sat down. Lord Shiva, whenever he sits down, if you notice his pictures and all, he doesn't have his eyes open. He tends to keep it half closed because he's meditating. He's always meditating on that Supreme Lord, Supreme Consciousness. So Lord Shiva did the same thing when he came into this assembly. But the only problem was when Daksha walked in, everybody stood up, except two persons. Brahma did not stand up because he's the father. All right, father doesn't have to stand up for the son, right? He sat down. But Daksha realized my son-in-law has not stood up, and that was Shiva. So he became very upset. Before even the sacrifice could start, he started speaking very loudly. And he said, this son-in-law of mine is very shameless. He lives in great poverty, abject poverty. He lives amongst people who are unsavory to the population at large. He has no wealth, he has no material qualification. He is totally disqualified for me to give my daughter to him. And today he has proven that he has no manners, no etiquette to even stand up before me. And his followers are just the same as him. Now Lord Shiva came with all his followers, Nandi was there and everybody else was there. And so he condemned Lord Shiva and he condemned his followers. And then at the end of it, right, he took Achaman and he spat it on the ground and he cursed. And his curse was very bad. He said that generally speaking in these sacrifices, whoever comes will actually leave. They will leave with oblations from the sacrifice. You go for a homam or something, they give you something and you take it back. It's very auspicious. He said in this sacrifice, Lord Shiva will be denied that oblations. He will be denied that right. So when he said that, right, he just spat on the ground and he stopped. The beauty of this, Bhagavatam says, is Lord Shiva stayed silent. He did not counteract. Even though he was fully capable of counteracting, he did not counteract. This is a very important thing. But what happened was his followers stood up. Nandi, for example, stood up. And he cursed all the Brahmanas who were with Daksha. And he said, from now on, you Brahmanas will be bereft of knowledge. And in Kali Yuga, you Brahmanas will go around begging people. Whereas in other yugas, they were not begging. So that's why you see today there is some truth to it, because today when you actually see sannyasis and you see other renounced people and brahmanas, they move from house to house. And so Nandi cursed the brahmanas. Now when Nandi cursed the brahmanas, Bhrigu, who was on the side of Daksha, he stood up and he counter-cursed. He said that if this is the case, right, all of you will be bereft of Vedic knowledge. And so each curse was counteracted by another curse. They did about 4 or 5 rounds of that counter-cursing and cursing, up and down, until the whole assembly became very disturbed. They had come for a sacrifice. What is the purpose of sacrifice? Sacrifice in Sanskrit means yajna. And when you sit down for any yajna, if you ask a priest who knows what they're doing, the first thing they will do is offer prayers to Yajnapati. Yajnapati means the fire, and fire is a representation of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu means Yajnapati. The aim of a sacrifice or a yajna is to please Krishna. And Lord Shiva had come there with that mood, not to fight, not to quarrel, not to find fault. But Daksha destroyed that sacrifice. And when he did that, right, the followers began fighting each other. They were shouting, cursing, counter-cursing. In all that, Lord Shiva stood up. And Bhagavatam tells us his head was bowed, he looked very sad. And he put his arms behind and very quietly he walked out of the assembly. And our acharyas tell us in the purport, this is a very significant point. Sometimes in this world, even if we do the best of things, somehow because of the nature of Kali Yuga, there's always envy. You know, many times I'm sure many of you have done things with well and best of intention. But people impute motive to it. They say, oh, you did this because of that. Or you did everything and still it's not enough. You know, you're all starting to shake your head, so I can see it's a common phenomena, isn't it? It happens to all of us, actually. We mean well, but it is taken very wrongly. So Lord Shiva did not want to counteract. Because a devotee by nature, right, and he's showing us how devotees should behave. Devotees should be na asya tat pratikurvanti. In Bhagavatam it is stated that even though a devotee may be very powerful, Lord Shiva was so powerful he could have burned down the entire congregation there. He is that powerful with his Jnana Chakshu. He is performing the dance of destruction at the end of this yuga or this kalpa or this manvantara. And yet he did not do that. Because the mood of a devotee is that if someone does something against us, we do not have to do the same thing to them. An eye for an eye is justice in the material world, not spiritual world. My spiritual master used to tell this, he explained to me this very nicely. He said, Devaki, if a dog bites a man, I don't know how many of you have been bitten by dogs. You have? Mataji, you have? Oh my God, okay, fine. It's not a very pleasant experience, right? No. Right? If you've been bitten by a dog, frankly, it doesn't get into the newspapers. Right? Nobody reported this, right, Mataji? Nobody. Maybe, it happens. Unfortunately. But if a man bites a dog, you can be assured it'll come in the newspaper. It will. It'll come. It'll be there. A man bit a dog when a dog bit a man. So it is not in our nature. Someone may bite us, but we have a higher nature. And Lord Shiva exhibited that higher nature. He did not counteract this low-level way of discussing and fighting and quarreling, and he just left. And when he left, right, everything became pacified. And for many years, nothing happened. But then what happened was Daksha became more bold. And he thought, see, my son-in-law walked away. He did not understand the greatness of Shiva, but he saw it as a weakness. But it doesn't matter. If the world sees something as a weakness, we cannot do things in the material world to please others when it is against our sastras. It is very important. We must compromise. We cannot compromise sastra. If something is given in sastras, it is a higher principle, and we should follow it. Someone may not understand it, but we don't go down to that point. So many years later, Daksha had another fire sacrifice. But this time there was no invitation sent to his son-in-law. And therefore, by default, no invitation sent to his daughter. So Sati was hearing, in those days they had no emails, no WhatsApp. But they had all these planes flying in Swargaloka. And I think they all began to talk about each other. There's this great party coming up. It's a fire sacrifice. Everyone will meet everyone. They will all be dressing very well. Sati waited every day. No news from her father. No news from her sisters. And then she went to Lord Shiva and she said, my dear Lord, I'm your better half, your other half. You will hear me. And he said, tell me what you want. She said, let us go to my father's place. I know what happened many years ago, but that's long ago. And I want to go. So she explains very innocently. She said, my father gave me so much gold. I've never used it. It's still in the cupboard. Actually, there was no cupboard. They're living under a tree. So I want to wear that gold and go. It's in Bhagavatam, I want to go. I want to go and see them, What's wrong? My sisters will welcome me and everything. Lord Shiva smiled at her and he gave her a very nice suggestion. He said, Sati, when you go to a house where you are not invited, you will be hurt. See, all of you came because you were invited. I take it you weren't invited. That's why you're here. That's why you're all here, right? If you're not invited, of course, Mataji and Prabhu will be open-hearted and receive you, but we're wondering, when did we invite them? Right? So it's a different feeling. So he said, if you walk into the house of a person who has not only not invited you, but who has also never welcomed you, and who has hurt you, right, and who is ready to hurt you again, you'll only come out of it very sorry, and you will end up hurting yourself. In other words, we must always be in the company of sadhu sangha. Very important. When we're in the company of like-minded people, like now we have put Krishna in the center, this company is very pleasing, Prabhu's, Mataji, is very pleasing. No one is feeling anxious. From your faces, you're all very peaceful. The next stage of peace is you will sleep, but you're not. But that's how peaceful you look, you see, right? But that is not the case with Sati's matter. So he told her, you can go, I won't stop you. But mark my words, your father is still envious, and he will say something, it will hurt you, and it will destroy you. He left it. Sati next morning left. When Lord Shiva realized she had left, he told Nandi and everybody else, you go with him. Go with her. Make sure she's all right. And so they went. And when she entered into the house of Daksha, Daksha literally looked through her, did not even acknowledge her. And Bhagavatam says Daksha's favorite daughter was actually Sati until she married Lord Shiva. See the envy. And so he refused to look at her. And all her mother, her sisters and all, they were very cautious to talk to her because of Daksha. And when she realized he had not even put aside any space for Lord Shiva, like he didn't exist, Sati lost it. She condemns she condemns her father, Daksha, for being so mean, so unkind, and so offensive to Asutosh, one who is so pleased by something. And then she says, I feel so bad. I was born of the body coming from you. You are Daksha, and I am known as Dakshayani. But now I feel ashamed of my name. Why should I have a body that comes from you? And sitting in that way, she self-immolated herself, and she burnt herself. When Lord Shiva knew about that, then he decided it is time to teach Daksha a lesson. And so he sent Virabhadra, his powerful energy, and they decimated the sacrifice. And they beheaded Daksha, and they took the head of Daksha and threw it to the southernmost corner of the fire sacrifice. And then all the Devatas and Brahma came to see Lord Shiva and said, calm down. Please, Daksha may have been wrong, but you should help him to recover. But that's why Lord Shiva is Asutosh. He said, I did that because he needed to be taught. If he had done that to me, I would never have harmed him. But he has done that to a great personality and a great devotee. It is my duty to send a signal. And so he came to the fire sacrifice, and he took a head of a goat, and he replaced the head he replaced that on Daksha. And Daksha awoke to the same consciousness he had, but now he was repentant. And he prayed to Lord Shiva for forgiveness. It's a very powerful story. It tells us a lot about our nature. But most importantly, this is also Lord Shiva's mercy. Sometimes if we misbehave, it is very important for the Supreme Lord and his pure devotees to correct us. So sometimes in our lives, if we are in difficulty, a devotee doesn't see that as, oh, misfortune. See it in a positive way. It's a lesson for me to be learned. What can I learn from this? Somewhere I've gone wrong. Instead of blaming the whole world, you look inward, and that will help your devotional service. All glories to Lord Shiva. Shall we end with one final kirtan?